What is up? My name is Tori Peters. I'm an entrepreneur, artist, and the author of the book, The Power of Words for Teens. So if you didn't know this already, I'm going through a program called Praxis. And we are going through a series of lectures this week on basically the history of art and the economic side of that history. So that's what we are going to be looking at today. There is something specifically that I thought would be really interesting to talk about, and it would be the parallel between television shows and serial novels, and sort of the futures and how that works. So we're going to be talking about that right now. These are based on a series of lectures by Paul Cantor. I'm going to put a link to the playlist that I got all of this from down below. They're really long lectures, but they're super interesting, and I definitely say it would be worth the time to take and learn from them. So yeah, let's see how this works out. Alright, so for this example, we are using Charles Dickens and his serial novels. I'm not really going to be specifically mentioning any of them, but I am going to be mentioning them in theory. So yeah, we're going to go through those and sort of explain those and explain just some little specific things using them. He's like my general example there. And then, so let's go ahead and I'm going to explain what serial novels are. So serial novels are a lot like magazines. So they come out most magazines don't actually come out once a week, they'll come out about once a month. But for a while there, serial novels would come out in chapters, like a magazine would. And be released in magazine form almost. So hopefully there's no wind noise. If there is, I'm sorry. In the 1800s, books were super, super expensive. So people didn't have a lot of money to just go spend on books. They also didn't have a whole lot of time to spend reading on books, spend reading books. So, normally they would end up with books of poetry up until really novels started becoming a thing, and people started having the enough money to go through them, and enough money to not have to spend all their time sitting around working. So they actually had a little bit more free time. They didn't have to worry about making ends meet so much anymore because of just the way that technology improved and things like that. So serial novels became really big. They became almost like soap operas on television, where you'd buy a chapter every week, and in the end it would build up to a book, whereas soap operas, they come out, every single week, and in the end it leads up to this big huge story arc, So that we're actually going to look at those parallels right now between them. A funny thing about the parallels between them is that the stigma was actually quite the same. A lot of people believed back then in the 1800s that reading novels was actually a waste of time. Nowadays we see reading as this big wow, you're searching for knowledge, and it's it's a big deal if you sit down and you take the time to read. And a lot of times nowadays we see watching television as a really, it's something lazy people do, we say, or you're wow, why don't you go do something interesting, that sort of thing. The stigma was very similar back in the 1800s, which I found really interesting because I didn't realize that. And a lot of the things that we find as high-class literature nowadays were actually seen as entertainment, a television show would be The Office or something like that, So, or seen as, say, Gilligan's Island sort of thing, where it's now seen as low culture, but in the 1800s these things were about the same level almost, maybe not quite, but that is a parallel that Mr. Paul Cantor did actually draw between them. One thing that I would like to point out is that we see in a parallel between some television shows and some of the Dickens novels is that Dickens took the feedback of his readers in these serial novels. One way that you would be able to do that is to look at the numbers of chapters and stuff that you've sold each week. So, when you get the numbers back for how much sold this week, how much money you made or whatever, from each chapter, you were able to tell really what you were able to sort of break it down and be like, okay, this is what's selling. I introduced this new character. That's the only thing that's new about this. So obviously this is a big deal. Maybe I need to write some more about this character. Like Dickens would take the time and take the influence from his readers and find that out, like, and rewrite things in order to appease his audience some more, because he wanted them to keep reading. Obviously, like, you want to make your reader happy, and television shows do the same thing. An example for this in like the modern days would be, I believe it's called The X-Files. I haven't actually spent the time to watch that show. I really want to. I watched like the first episode at one point and never really got any further than that. I know I need to, but yeah, I don't really spend a lot of time watching television either. And one thing that they did do, and this is an example that Mr. Cantor used, is that the writers, they added a character. They introduced like a nerd character basically, and he was a computer nerd, right? And so basically they introduced this. The writers were like, we don't know about this character, we're gonna use him anyway, we'll just figure it out. And the internet blew up about this character. The internet was like, we love this person. This needs to be in the television show way more. We need this character all the time. We self-identify as this character, basically. And the writers were like, okay, you know what? We're cool with that. Let's do this. And, you know, they turned this character into, from what I've heard, a major part of this television show. And that's just one way for a producer to, you know, they took the feedback they heard from the internet, they heard from their viewers, and decided, you know, yeah, we're gonna go for this. And so there is a parallel between those two as well. I'm not entirely sure where, like, exactly what time frame Mr. Cantor was speaking in, but he was talking, he mentioned 2006. So between 2006 and 2010, which is when the published date on YouTube is for these lectures, there is Mr. Cantor made a prediction in these videos saying, like, streaming would become a thing. And he was completely right. Things like Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, all those products that are common in households right now are really useful. And he said something along the lines of like, oh, I can't see this not becoming a thing. And yeah, that was completely right. So, but now that we're on the topic of Netflix, let's look at how sort of Netflix does it in comparison and the difference between that in the television shows. So with TV, normally a network will go ahead and release an episode once a week of a television show. You know, there's one personal show that I actually like to watch. It's called Last Man Standing. They release one every week, and then they have a show that comes on right after that is also released once a week, you know, and those are really great shows, and they're really interesting to watch. I'm sure that they probably film them every, like, all at once probably, and then just sort of release them as they go. But, you know, it sort of prolongs it, and it's kind of like the serial novels in the fact that, you know, like, it's released in a sort of compilation in that fact, right? Okay, well, Netflix has started doing this thing where they're creating their own content, which, honestly, it would be stupid for them not to, and the way that they're releasing it is like they would release any other content on their platform. So they release it in a season, and they'll just release it in a season at a time. And so they've got season 1, season 2, one episode or show that most people know about and most people like, some people don't, I personally do, is Stranger Things. And Stranger Things is one of those that Netflix created by themselves. They have released some. It was a major hit. Everyone loved it. And then they've got season 2 out now, and I'm sure they're already working on season 3 at this point. Maybe not. I haven't really looked it up. So, but yes, so everyone is like in love with Stranger Things, right? One thing that I find very interesting about these, the way that Netflix releases them, is almost like they're releasing like you would release a movie or a published book, but that sort of leaves out the the audience input in that. So when you release a television show, there is a bit of leeway in there. Like I was talking about X-Files, where they were like, oh, we need to add this character in more often. So you can't really do that so much with a show that is released in a season all at once. So I find that very interesting, and I feel like that's something that Netflix will actually probably need to be very careful about in the future, is because when they release a show, they release it all at once. And the thing about viewers, which I have found out on YouTube and things like that, is that viewers are honestly pretty, they're ADD. We'll just say that. And so if a viewer doesn't like something, they will just stop watching it. If someone doesn't like what's going on in this culture right now, they say that you, like, we'll use YouTube as an example. For YouTube, you have to get someone's attention within about 8 seconds. And if you don't, then they'll probably click to another video. Personally, for me, I normally will last about 30 seconds before I'm like, okay, I'm done. Because I do like to give things a chance most of the time. But, yeah, a lot of times you'll have to catch someone's attention within the first 8 seconds of whatever you're doing for them to stick around. So, that being said, Netflix is probably going to have to be pretty careful about the way that they release episodes. Not necessarily the way they release episodes, but the way that they film the episodes, in making sure that their audience is going to enjoy each episode in character. It leaves out a lot of audience participation and audience input that I feel like is actually really valuable for normal television networks. And so, that being said, I'm not like saying that, oh, Netflix is releasing all of their episodes all at once, this is stupid of them. No, I'm not saying that at all. I think that they're really revolutionizing a part of the way that they have revolutionized the way that we enjoy television. There's a thing, thanks to these streaming websites, that allows us to binge watch. Binge watching was never a thing. You know, people would sit down and read for hours, but they would never, like, watch television for, like, the same kind of television all at once for hours, besides doing DVDs. So I feel like Netflix has really done a good job with what they've got and what they've been doing. That being said, I do think that they're going to have to be a little bit careful about how they go about doing stuff in the future, because at some point viewers might start dropping off, like from Stranger Things. There's a reason why people, stop watching television shows after 3 or 4 seasons, is because, they, and a lot of times it's because the writers and things stop listening to their audience. And so that's going to have to be something that I feel like Netflix needs to look out for. So, yes, this has been a short little video explaining all of this. Actually, this is probably going to end up being pretty long now that I look at it. But, yeah, I hope that you found this interesting. Do you have any comments, any questions, or really anything that you would like to discuss in this topic? I'd love to hear them. Leave them down in the comments below. Let me know about them. I would love to just sit down and, like, talk to you guys about this stuff. It's super interesting, and yeah, I'm really enjoying this module. I'm enjoying just being able to sort of sit back and enjoy this content and just, think about it. And yeah, so I hope you guys have a great adventure today, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!